Welcome to Platformative, the final destination for all your travel and touring needs. Gaming lets us explore new and exciting locations that we could only dream of visiting in reality, but it's important to plan ahead and know what you're getting into. Take Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, for example. Depending on the stage you choose, you may be in for an unforgettable experience, or haunting nightmare. With so many stages to choose from, it can be daunting deciding where to go. That's where we come in.
With competitive style play being so commonplace with Smash even in casual friendlies, it's not surprising that many will completely ignore the massive list of stages as they truly are. There's a lot more to most Smash stages than a few platforms in a blast zone. With Smash Ultimate in its finished state, I've wanted to take some time and dig into key parts of the game that make it special, and one such form was taking a stroll through its vast stage selection to see how I felt about them. Therefore, I have played through every stage in Smash Ultimate to rank them from best to worst. I didn't make up any kind of rubric or scoring system, but I took these things into consideration. Visuals. Is the stage aesthetically pleasing and consistent? Design. Is the stage built in an interesting way that's fun to play on? And versatility. How well can the stage be played with different numbers of fighters? For that last point specifically, I played on each stage in a 1v1, a 4-player free-for-all, and an 8-player free-for-all. However, I definitely put more importance on 2 and 4-player matches since 8 players is kind of its own animal that didn't exist until recently. So it's better for a stage to feel good with 2 or 4 than it is to feel good with 4 or 8. There's a couple other factors I started to consider while playing through that work more on a sliding scale. I played all the stages with hazards on, and there's a pretty tough balance to be struck to make sure hazards are at all noticeable and make the match interesting without being completely ridiculous and drawing too much attention. There's also a sweet spot for the stage's design and its overall representation of its franchise, not worrying about specifics from each franchise seen in Smash being present on stage, more so a scale of feeling like a plain Smash stage with a different coat of paint, being ripped straight from the game without consideration of how it'll actually play, and the perfect blend of being tailor-made for Smash while feeling like a unique slice of a series. With that out of the way, let's begin our trek through Smash Ultimate's stage list. I'll be going from the 6th worst to the 6th best, leaving the top and bottom 5 for the end of the video. Just barely escaping the bottom 5 is Wii U's Mario Galaxy, a truly pathetic stage composed of an annoyingly curved floor and not much else. This stage made me consider making it a top and bottom 6. I do not like this stage and I never have. The background and overall aesthetic is nice enough, invoking certain elements of its namesake, but literally just being a big curve and some platforms makes it incredibly boring, while fighting frequently gravitates to the edges and closed blast zones make it frustrating. If it had additional phases of being pulled to or jumping between other planets, that might be enough to save it, but as is, this sits firmly in the bottom 10. Admittedly, I have less strong negative feelings about this than Mario Galaxy, but Pilot Wings is still a stage that I have no desire to play on. Another Wii U alum, its layout is very plain, while the rotation of the plane can lead to some irritating deaths. Its background is mostly pretty bland or ugly, with certain sections being more tolerable, but most importantly, there's another stage that takes us through this exact same location much better in Woohoo Island, leaving this stage basically no reason to exist. Our first entry from Ultimate and one of its few new non-DLC stages, we have Great Plateau Tower, pulling from Breath of the Wild. Pulling from is pretty generous though, as I don't really get why this was chosen to represent such a dense, explorable world. While a very nice looking stage that captures the atmosphere pretty well and shows off some of the key locations, the stage itself is much rougher. The floor is okay, but what is with this destructible overhang thing? It's flat out unfun, and I don't feel the connection to Breath of the Wild at all in destroying it and having it rebuild itself through Sheikah magic. This feels to me like the Smash team got an early look at Breath of the Wild, saw that towers were an important visual landmark, and went from there without pulling from the slew of potentially more interesting options. Another base game Ultimate Edition, Moray Towers represents another huge missed opportunity. In contrast to Breath of the Wild, Splatoon presents a pretty straightforward opportunity for good stages, being primarily focused on multiplayer with distinct maps. However, this feels like possibly the worst choice. On top of its bland layout making for uninteresting fights and annoying movement, I also realized the background is strangely not Splatoon feeling to me. Like, I don't know how you change it, but it feels like a default city that they throw in the background without the game's funky style. This is improved a little bit when the stage is in night mode, but that doesn't fix the stage itself. Still sticking to the latest entry of Smash, we have the one-hit wonder Big Battlefield. I knew pretty early on that this would rank lower than others because its only purpose is to be a bigger battlefield for 7 or 8 players as introduced in Wii U. It would probably earn more points for its background if it wasn't also used in 2 other better stages, leaving it a very lame stage choice that drags out any match that isn't absolutely packed with fighters. Speaking of big stages, we have the largest stage in the game, Palutena's Temple. This is another stage that suffers the original sin of being too large for its own good. You fundamentally can't play on this thing. It's nice enough looking, and the sad thing is that there's like 4 good stages in this one gigantic mess making up its 4 corners. Curiously, I found the 1v1s worked best on here, as any more has the camera compensate by zooming ridiculously far away to see everyone. When that happens, you lose any sense of what's going on. I like big stages in theory, but this fails its mission. Finally, touching on a new Smash game with Brawl, we have Hanabo. A pretty classically hated stage to my knowledge. Its biggest crime is just being weird. It's kinda ugly with its bright green background, and the layout feels off when the leaves move around. It may make for a good green screen, but doesn't have much going for it. Garrick Mach Monastery is our first Ultimate DLC stage and is another that I've disliked from day one. Traveling stages can be hit or miss as is, but this is literally just 4 walk-offs. That's it. If you don't care about 3 houses, this stage offers nothing for you, and even if you do, I can't imagine this is great representation of the game. I've only played a little of it myself, so I wouldn't know. If you have played it, let me know what you think. It plays fine on the whole, but it's an exceptionally bland stage. This is another stage I've never liked and honestly thought would rank even lower. Hailing from Brawl, Mushroomy Kingdom is a truly baffling stage. I believe it was made to match Brawl's darker, more grounded theme while also representing the iconic starting world of Mario, but tonally, it's always felt wrong. It's some weird post-apocalypse Mushroom Kingdom along with being a straight rip of the game's design that isn't very fun to play on. To be fair, most scrolling stages aren't though. Bad choices all around, please remove at your earliest convenience. Smash 64 makes its first appearance with Super Happy Tree, maybe the stupidest name on the list. As our first encounter with the 64 stages, we run into a recurring issue. While some stages were visually touched up for Ultimate, they took a more conservative approach to those from 64, and while it works for some, it really doesn't for others. With Super Happy Tree, it makes it feel a bit amateurish, like a generic stage plopped on a flat background. It also suffers with high numbers of fighters, and the clouds don't really work as they should for the flow of the match. They disappear too quickly to really do anything with, and the right side having to really spreads the camera thin and makes the match feel too lopsided. Our first entry from 3DS is Spirit Train. While the background and vibe of the stage are nice, it's all too easy to feel cramped on this stage even without many players. While it has issues like the camera being pulled in weird ways to show hazards and the rotating back section of the train ranging from okay to bad in design, the biggest thing keeping the stage from being fun is the speed of the tracks. Of all the fast moving stages with roads and water, this is the worst, being absolutely untenably fast, literally impossible to recover from. Venom, like Pilot Wings, is another example of a stage doing the same thing that another stage does way better. They turned the Great Fox the wrong way and ruined it with an annoying middle separation and worse implementation of visiting R-Wings. The way the wings curve make a lot of moves and fights just not function properly. The only thing I'll give this stage is that the background is really nice, with certain sections being the closest we're gonna get to a Doom Mars stage. No, not the fighter, the stage from Wii U. Starting here, I'm going to have a little less to say and hopefully move through faster, with many stages that I don't have particular problems with, but that do nothing special for me. The premise of this stage is okay, it looks fine and the layout works well enough. My biggest problem is that I don't really like these flat seeming throwback stages. It's too much of a, hey, remember this? Overworking with the spirit of the game to create an interesting stage or mechanic. Much like Palutena's Temple, Wii U brought in Great Cave Offensive to justify 8-player smashes. I like this one a bit more as it has more of a unique identity, in large part due to the lava kill walls that keep things from stalling out as much as possible. It's still too big to feel comfy and messier than Palutena's Temple, with an awkwardly large section at the bottom, tunnels that are easy to get stuck in, and an extremely cramped upper area. It's a little small and boring, but overall works fine. Generally, stages with a lower center tend to work alright by keeping fights flowing into one another. Birdo's fine, the extra platforms move too quickly to be anything, and my biggest problem is that it's just ugly. While other stages blend 2D and 3D well, this one isn't appealing to me at all. You know, in my head, I always liked Brinstar Depths. It's a nice dark stage, and the concept of spinning the entire stage to change how the fight progresses is really cool. In practice, it doesn't work all that well. It's way too easy to get separated from the fight, stuck in awkward little corners at the bottom of the stage waiting for it to turn. It would have been nice if they found another series to try this concept out with, but as is, it's a neat but failed experiment. Man, Melee is really getting it back to back. While charming enough with a cute turtle that will come in and out at different directions, it sucks too hard getting caught under the stage in the water to like Great Bay very much. Tingle might lend it some extra points, but without items he's just kind of there, and on the whole it feels very tight. Okay, done with Melee for now. Flat Zone X is just whatever. The border isn't as distracting as others in this ilk, but none of the layouts are very stimulating, which is worsened by the bland old style visuals. Next! Here's another visually dead stage. Wii Fit is meant to have a clean, almost clinical look that's approachable and friendly. That doesn't translate very well to a Smash stage. Mix in an extremely generic design and Wii Fit Studio earns its spot here. The final extra large stage introduced in Wii U, Gower Plain, is also our first instance of a stage boss. Stage bosses are the hardest hazard to pull off, and Metal Face isn't the worst, but doesn't add much. That's not really the stage's biggest problem though. While it's nice looking and not too big to work with, the huge gap in the middle is really unfun and makes it hard to properly interact with multiple fights going on. This I have a little more outside confirmation on than Garrick Mach, as I have friends who like Banjo who are a little underwhelmed by Spiral Mountain, though they do like it a little more than me. The background is really nice, but that's kind of the only point of this stage with its boring platform layout. It feels like they poured all their work into designing the background instead of making the stage more unique. The spiral concept also means that there's always an awkward little edge at the bottom of one side, and the spinning itself can be a little disorienting at times. The darkest stage in Smash, Dracula's Castle, is another just okay. Aesthetically nice, layout is okay, though I don't like the weird stairs off to one side. Main issue is another case of missed opportunity due to Ultimate's focus on background representation over functionality, with monsters coming in and posing for camera without doing anything. You mostly forget they're there, which overall hurts how memorable this stage is. A cute concept that primarily works with 4 fighters. The randomized layouts with in-scale household items and toys is fun, but it seemed like it usually put the bulk of the build on the left and a random item on the right. Good dogs though, 10 out of 10. Despite having a nice background, Gerudo Valley is another pretty bland environment for a fight. I found it easy to die early, and the hazards not only make the sides less interesting by destroying them, but also don't look all that great. The ice in particular grows in a really ugly way. Visually, Balloon Fight doesn't offend me, nor does it pique my interest. I'm not too big on the looping stage concept, and the only thing really propping this up in the rankings are the redesigns it uses to accommodate more fighters. Wish more stages did that. Wily Castle would be so much higher if it weren't for the Yellow Devil. When it's just being a stage, it's pretty decent and fun to play on, but the Yellow Devil takes up so much real estate and draws so much attention to itself that it hinders the stage tremendously. I appreciate what Green Hill Zone attempts to do in representing Sonic. It goes for a unique design and it's extremely nice looking. However, the rounded bowl shape has never worked for me. It feels awkward to fight in and creates walk-offs with super tight blast zones or gets destroyed, making it even worse. The more I thought about it, the lower this stage went, becoming a clear checkpoint in the list where the stages turn actively negative. A serviceable traveling stage, but doesn't have a strong identity in my mind at all, being completely forgettable. Of all the Zelda stages, this is one of the weaker ones for me, mostly held up by the fact that it's fine to play on. Though one of the newest stages, the design of All Rest feels a little more classic, with a simplistic design and subtle stage movement and changes. It's not super exciting, but fun enough with an okay environment, but gets way too cramped with more and more players. Primarily held up by its nice background and ambiance, Eldin is at the end of the day another long flat walk-off. It's slightly better than some, worse than others, the hazards are fine and shake things up a little. Honestly, Wrecking Crew was much better than I remembered, which still doesn't say much at 80. I used to think it was one of the worst, but it's kind of fun. Keeping the stage fluidly changing with the explosions is a cool concept, still pretty boring to play on and visually uninteresting. Tour Timer Island is just fine. It looks nice, but it is what it is. Initially, the designs I got were just flat ground with a bump and very boring, but upon revisiting, I got some more trees, which helped a good deal. I find some of these 3DS stages seem to play it fairly safe, but in full screen, it doesn't do much for me. Summit has a pretty fun design, a really nice environment that is distinct in Smash and is leagues better than other old Ice Climber stages, and changes pretty dynamically, keeping things fresh. It's a bit small though, and the bottom tunnel can be super weird and sticky and not function properly in a fight. Plus it sucks to get caught and killed in the stage break. My least favorite tournament legal stage by a long shot, Lylat has the annoyances of something like Pilot Wings, but with a much better design and background. Not very exciting, but you can get a good match going here if you can tolerate some jank. While it's the final stage to come to Wii U, Umbra has more of the design philosophies of Ultimate. The platforms are fine, with those floating in and out helping a lot, but the main focus was on the background, the concept of a falling stage with big monstrosities flying in the background without actively changing anything. While some stages redeemed themselves a little in my playthrough, On It felt for me. Seeing the town in 3D in the background is super nice, but the design can be a little annoying at times, especially with the far sides turning hellish, and the awnings and cars as hazards are just okay. Prism Tower is an extremely middling stage. Background is fine but not special. It's a traveling stage without many distinct locations. Since the building mostly stays the same, it's just fine. New Donk City Hall is Prism Tower, but slightly better. The world has a little more life to it, and Pauline and her band are a fun little touch. I will never understand why this was chosen for an Odyssey stage though. It's a game with distinct colorful worlds and the exhilaration of traveling between them as a driving emotion, but we just get another boring city type tower stage. Could have been so much more. This was a very early traveling stage for Smash and is very weird because of it. Giving Rainbow Cruise a glow up doesn't do it any favors. The background is a little more generic and off with the vibe of Mario, and the random platforms just floating there feels weird. Still fairly fun to play on in a classic, but a little cramped, especially on the ship. Another Melee classic, Big Blue plays a little better than it has any right to. The constant movement and action never gets to be too much, with helpful extra standing room and the floor not immediately ending you, unlike Spirit Train. It's pretty nice looking and is cool to see the ships, but not a stage I always want to play on. King of Fighter Stadium has a really cool gimmick, being the invisible walls to invoke the feeling of classic fighting games. I also love the look of the stadium and the little touches when someone gets a kill. As we'll see throughout this list, I love when stages feel like an actual arena to watch the players fight. It is still simply flat ground though, and the more players you add, the less you notice the walls at all. A platform in the middle would have gone a long way. Skyworld would be much higher if it weren't for the sometimes weird ledges and destructible floors. They detract from what is otherwise a simple yet unique stage with a good design and size and okay aesthetic. This is the most Smash 64 feeling stage, for better and worse. The worst is how ugly the background is without any kind of touch-up, being way too crammed for over 4 players, and having floating stage elements look off again like in Rainbow Cruise. But it's mostly a fun time to play on, those floating elements do keep things interesting, and I like the subtle consistent change offered by the moving floor on the bottom. Both better and worse than Green Hill, Windy Hill is a better stage on the whole with a more playable layout and kinda interesting tilt given to the whole thing, but it's much more generic and less Sonic feeling than Green Hill. It also felt extremely easy to die here, maybe it's a Blast Zone thing. Yet another stage redeemed in current playthroughs. Mileage may vary with how much you enjoy the throwback look, but that mostly goes back of mind while fighting. Good layout and another well-balanced moving stage making touching the floor not miserable. By its nature, this is a very weird stage to rank, as it changes literally every time. I love that gimmick, but some layouts are better than others. My 8-player match in particular was pretty rough and way too small. Still can be a lot of fun, and the shifts through Mario themes is a good choice. A nice enough stage to play on with a good size and brief, interesting changes and hazards. Special shout out to the background touches here, seemingly messing with the depth of field to make it feel smaller. Only grievance is that it sucks to get caught under the suspended platforms. Certain sections are worse than others, and the new Mario aesthetic is a bit of a bore, but Mushroom Kingdom U is still very playable and keeps the fight going without too much clutter from the location changes. Just a tiny bit lifeless feeling in a weird way that some Brawl stages feel, but I still like Figure 8 Circuit overall. It's not a go-to, but it's fun to play on and is a cool interpretation of a more classic Mario Kart experience. Good at making you feel like you're standing in the middle of an active race on some Iron Man 2 nonsense. Yoshi stages can be hit or miss in terms of the charm meshing with the design, but I think they succeed here, keeping the 2D backdrop alive and moving. Stage itself is pretty good, the canyon shape is good while occasionally making a mess on the right side, and the platforms being able to get knocked off is a nice form of alteration. Okay, realistically, this stage should be ranked closer to King of Fighters. It's the same core gimmick of walls, even if I like it a little more here having the dojo break and come back. It also shares its problem of being a standard floor when looking past the gimmick. But I have a background in karate, and this stage and Tekken as a whole just ooze childhood karate vibe and nostalgia. Also, the background is beautiful, especially in Battlefield and Omega when you can see it consistently. Weirdly fitting fairly close to Mishima Dojo in my mind, Luigi's Mansion does a good job with the spooky vibe and the multi-layered layout supporting more interesting fights. However, the destruction feels weaker and more arbitrary here, and doesn't feel exceptionally Luigi's Mansion to me. Nice looking, but not a standout. Changing platforms is fun, but not the best use. Walk off is lame. It's decent. Suzaku doesn't scratch the same karate itch that Tekken does for me, but it's still a highly aesthetically pleasing stage with a simple design that isn't really used by others. Still not the most exciting, but good. Now here we have one of the funkier designs. It keeps the inward slope layout, which is good for fights, but only uses 5 floating platforms and relies heavily on hazards to keep things interesting. I think certain uses of the lava are good while others can be irritating. The giant wave causes a huge tussle by the pod, even though sometimes it just doesn't matter. Regardless, still a pretty good stage and very visually appealing. Our first of the Pokemon Arena stages, Kalos has a few things dragging its pleasant aesthetic and decent design down. Namely, the hazards are fine but aren't as fun as others, and certain changes making the ledge disappear can be super annoying at the wrong time. Kind of a mirror to Yoshi's Island, Distant Planet pulls farther ahead with a very pretty setting and this lovely Gentleman Bulborb coming and going. Main downside is the water that will sometimes come down the hill, which can be a little irritating. This is everything Mushroomy Kingdom wishes it was. Clearly conveys the classic Mario side-scrolling feel while mixing things up here and there to keep them engaging. I especially like how the stage changes directly due to background elements pushing through. Mostly brought down because I still don't love the scrolling stages or the new Mario style. Alright, I have no right to try and rank this, I'm far too blinded by nostalgia here. Reasonably, it's another flat stage reliant on hazards to keep things interesting, but I love the design so much, and the hazards do a pretty decent job at being present without ruining the fight. Mostly. More or less a better living room, using the smaller scale and random block design in a more smashable way. As with other random stages, it can be hit or miss, but it's generally kept lively with 5V being an engaging hazard. A slightly better Mario Kart stage with a nice look, good variation in the transformations, and clear consideration for the number of fighters and what the stage has to be to make that work. While I enjoy aspects like the walls and watching people get wrecked by the train, and the stage itself being well designed on the whole, it's mostly elevated by its sharp style that screams Persona. The bright, in-your-face colors and wacky art direction is a welcome change, as is the complete alteration to match the music. This is where the stages really pick up for me and make me want to play on them. This kind of big cityscape type of stage is a rare and endangered breed for Smash, but I usually enjoy them, including the originator Saffron City. The layout is overall very enjoyable to play on with the Tower of Death off to the right, but it's let down by the dull aesthetic, the Pokemon hazards being more distracting than interesting, and the left side being just a little too low to keep the entire fight flowing together. It's Battlefield, but Yoshi! Another pretty singular design among the Smash stages, I really enjoy the organic elements of Brinstar, being able to modify the major sections of the stage. Along with the acid, it's good at keeping things fresh and creating tension. A little small though. This was a stage I really wanted to see return in Ultimate, and in the end, I think it's pretty alright. It has the same issue of genericness as Rainbow Cruise, and I don't really like how it's split down the middle, but the buttons causing subtle changes are good, and Bonsai Bill is a cool hazard. Smash usually blends pretty well with this childlike type of tone, it kind of harkens back to its origins. The transitions are a little bland, but each section is pretty good, with the ship section being one of the better seafaring stages in terms of design and size. Another Melee stage that made the jump well, Green Greens does the symmetrical design better than Peach's Castle, with better platforms and chaotic bomb blocks. It is a little small, and Wispy is much more annoying here than Dreamland, being too powerful. A little more forgettable, but in a positive way. It just sits comfortably on the list. Good layouts, like that it feels like you're dropping in at random points in a real race. Nice background.
Big Rob.
Good vibe, overall works pretty well, which is aided by the collapsing walls. Just kinda wish the spotlight did something more. I want a sniper to take me out instantly. Lives up to its name with a fun arena vibe and spring platforms that can lead to some weird fun KOs. With more players, it's a little disorienting and harder to keep track of the spring jumping, but the layout still works. This is such a good concept for a stage. The layout and look is all well and good, but the little microgames are a great touch. Works best with less players though, and the transitions can lead to some stupid deaths. Reset is a pretty cool stage. The beginning is nice and more sturdy in its design. I like that for some reason it feels like a different angle of the castle siege battle later in the day with the lighting. Then it has a drastic shift with a wilder platform layout with destructibility and a funky background. It's not the most fun and clean transitions are still a challenge here, but I dig it. This stage excels in its visuals. There is such a ridiculous amount of detail on display here. Even without any connection to Dragon Quest, I love it. As a stage, it's pretty good too. The changing platforms are a little more engaging than I remembered. The mother stages all generally have a high level of detail as well, feeling fully realized. New Pork is just a little too big and its structure is a little more awkward than others, but it's still pretty fun and the Chimera is a fun looming threat. I like Hyrule Castle, it's cute. The look is a little bland in the Smash 64 way, and these middle plats almost get no use ever, but I enjoy playing here from time to time. The tornado is a fun, simple hazard as well. It's literally as basic as you can get, but if it ain't broke. FD is held up mostly by aesthetics, with a super cool look and beautiful background that kinda tells the story of World of Light. It's perfectly fun to play on, but naturally nothing mind-blowing. Who asked for this? Why does Small Battlefield exist? Well, either way, it's a fun stage. I don't really know why it was made when Pokemon Stadium does more or less the same thing, but it works and the background is nice, but I'll talk more about that with Completely Average Battlefield. The Parasite Queen's humble abode is pretty cool. It keeps things interesting, and I especially like the flip and lights turning off. Simple layout, but this stage is very cute. The artsy style is very appealing, and I love that the seasons change, just a pleasant little touch. The same simple and clean layout as many others, but has the same aesthetic intensity as something like Yggdrasil's Altar. The detail in the recreation of Kingdom Hearts is insane, and Dive to the Heart is a great choice. Square seems to choose really simple stages with tons of background detail, just like Northern Cave. In terms of Square's generic stage formats, this is probably the best sized, and the background is gorgeous. The entire stage is this kind of nice seafoamy green, and I just think it's pretty. Much like the Square designs, the DK stages are frequently stunning. This is an amazing update of Melee's graphics, and the stage itself is pretty cool. The bottom sides can feel a little weird and empty during the fight, but the core part of the stage is fun and has a good personality with the moving components. I like Halberd not only as a more limited traveling stage with two main parts, but also for sort of representing Subspace Emissary with how important the Halberd is to Brawl's campaign. The hazards coming from the back are pretty fun as well. This is the turning point to stages that I really enjoy. Minecraft World just makes me happy. The only real complaints are it can feel a tiny bit small and something about the background feels off to me. It's like the resolution or parallax or something makes it feel like a JPEG. But I've really come around to the stage having set variants instead of being randomized, with Forest and Snow being best, Village, Tiger, and Mountain being okay, and Savannah being the least interesting. The day to night shift is good too, though I wish the mobs would interact, but that's an ultimate issue. This is similar enough to Luigi's Mansion being a multi-leveled house environment, but better in two ways. One, there's more room for action, and two, the Miis. It's so fun to see your Miis just hanging out, along with the vacation island in the background. A cute, simple stage. While it's not as fun in its use of the Miis, Find Me is better than Tomodachi in most ways. The design is good, the setting is dramatic, and the boss hazard is pretty well handled. I like stat changing as a core gimmick, it's very unique without being busted. Like I said, I dig when stages seem like actual places to fight, and the changing design with the mechanical motivation is really fun. Looking past the stage, I find the overall vibe a little lacking though. I really enjoy this idea of touring Delfino, and while I like the stopping points, I also really appreciate the flying platform changing in design each time. As stated what seems like years ago, this is a far better version of Pilot Wings. The island is much nicer to look at, the locations are unique and fun to fight on, and like Delfino, the main platform changes each time. Plus they threw in an arena, specifically to boost their score with me, clearly. Another stage sharing the battlefield layout before it even existed, but this one's just a classic, bringing us into the top 20. It's a good size, looks fairly nice, even if it didn't get updated and still has PNGs flying by, and Wispy is a solid hazard, mixing fights up just enough. This Pokemon stage handles hazards a little better, moving and affecting the stage instead of just throwing stuff onto it. The building background is less interesting than the barren wasteland, and adding ramps to the sides is always lame, but it's still one of the more enjoyable stages to play on. This stage likely deserves a slightly lower ranking, only making subtle changes to the battlefield format by moving platforms and being smaller for bigger fights. But come on, it's Fountain of Dreams, and look how great it looks in Ultimate. I've said it before and I'll say it again, fight-themed stadium stages for the win, baby. It just feels good, and the screen in the background with custom titles is excellent. Only downside is I don't really like the off-stage sections, but it helps for bigger fights. Spear Pillar actually originally pierced the top 10, but was knocked down by some of the hazards like slow-mo being mood killers on repeat plays. However, I've always loved the design and size of this stage, and love even more that parts of the top section will break off to make them flow together even more. A lot of the hazards are still very fun as well. I'm covering these two together as they're the same core concept in different sizes. They both work great for most fights. I like the rolling world in the background, and real-time based changes like KK are great. Smashville ranks a little higher as I like its size and background more. The only other dual ranking are the Pokemon Stadiums. These have more distinct personalities in my mind, but ultimately serve the same purpose with a great base design. Stadium 2 is a little worse for me because of the hazards. I've never liked them as much. While Stadium 1's hazards may not affect control of the character and usually just add a big structure on the left, the simple environmental changes are all the stage needs to keep things engaging. Throw in the arena feel and a big screen showing you gameplay and stats, and we have some highly ranked stages. This is where rankings start to get pretty tough for me. This stage super fits Smash's vibe, and the ship is a great template for a Smash stage, though I feel this one's a little small compared to how good Paper Mario's feels. It's still a great stage with fun hazards and extensions off to the side, giving more room to breathe. Breaking into the top 10, we have Jungle Japes, and the design of this stage just screams Smash to me. Something about this symmetrical layout, the larger middle with a platform and two smaller sides just works. On top of that, as a DK stage, it's visually stunning once again, and I love that it feels like a solid place that exists in the universe while still being a functioning stage. The water can be a little annoying along with the claptrap, but that's forgivable in the big picture. I'm not sure you'd exactly call Castle Siege a traveling stage, but if you do, it's the best one. Not only are the three sections very distinct and fun to play on individually with cool backgrounds and layouts, but the transitions are pretty smooth without needing to lift people off the ground and leave them behind. Another stage that comes to mind when I think of a classic hectic Smash experience. And speaking of the Smash experience, this is it. When it comes to no hazard fights, Battlefield is the simple tournament legal stage for me. It may seem odd to have this so far above FD and Small Battlefield, but what it comes down to is simple. Smash is a platform fighter, and the three platforms fully emphasize that. I've briefly touched on the background before, but to give it its due, look at this. This is so ridiculously good looking. The water, the floating islands, the tiny birds that are definitely just two red polygons. This just feels like the world of Smash, plain and simple, and you can't go wrong with Battlefield. But what if we made Battlefield absolutely insane? It's funny, when Midgar first came out, I thought it was super lame to get another Battlefield clone. But man, coming back to this stage was great. It has a great unique aesthetic, the Battlefield layout still works great obviously, and the hazards are shockingly well balanced. I like the scramble to trigger the event to keep yourself safe, the little animation fanfare to herald it in, and the way hazards work themselves. They all feel like they altered the stage without clutter or drawing too much attention away from the fight. Battlefield may be good for a no-nonsense brawl, but this is where the party game craziness comes in. And finally, just missing out of the top 5, we have Melee's 4 side. Much like Mario Galaxy, this made me consider extending the top and bottom echelons because I love this stage. It's beautiful, there's tons of room to fight without being too large, and the crane and UFO are simple, excellent moving elements. The one thing keeping this stage from stardom is the middle split. I don't like when stages cut themselves down the middle, it generally hurts the flow of the fights, making things feel too isolated. If this design was meshed with Saffron Cities, it would for sure be one of the best maps, but 4-side is still one of my go-tos. Alright, only 10 more stages to go. If I haven't mentioned your favorite yet, you better start hoping it landed on the right side of things. Let's go back and forth from low to high and kick things off with number 111, the 5th worst stage in Smash Ultimate. You may have noticed already, but I generally don't enjoy the retro throwback stages. Smash can be a beautiful game, and while occasionally ripping an old design straight into Smash can be fun, in practice it doesn't make the most of the opportunity. Dreamland GB is here for a few reasons. The colors are bland, the scrolling can be annoying, clearly making very little changes to the original level, and some of the stopping points are boring, especially with fewer fighters. However, the true cause of this stage's ranking is the border. It is just too big. It takes up so much room, blocking the most important aspect of the game, and makes the stage feel even smaller and harder to navigate. I don't get why they didn't adjust this for Switch. On a given day, I may hate playing on Mario Galaxy more, but for such a visual fumble, I think Dreamland GB deserves to herald in the bottom 5. Now this is my kind of throwback stage. At the start of the video, I mentioned a sliding scale of design where something feels made for Smash while still being pulled from the source material. This feels damn near close to that dead center compromise. It's got a healthy amount of platforms, making for tons of room to fight. The weighted platforms are a fun gimmick without disappearing for too long, and the pipes are cute little escape options even if they practically don't do much. The look of this stage works great for me as well. Of all the N64 stages kept traditional, this might be the one that benefits the most, with vibrant colors that nail the feel and a background that feels flat and retro while still having appealing layering. It feels fan-made, but in a really good way, like what someone would make for a classic Mario stage that could still work in a more competitive setting. This one's a little harder to describe why I dislike it so much. It feels a little worse than other new Mario stages, the platforms don't do much for me, and just sliding back and forth is a very bland way to change things up. With one glance, I think you can see the main problem here though. It's too visually noisy. Why did they just fill the stage with coins? It changes the gameplay in such a negligible way while either pulling all attention away from fighting or getting in the way if you choose to ignore them. Of all the attempted gimmicks to reference an element of the game of origin, this is maybe the most failed one. Although I may yearn for the days of the giant Sector Z version of the Great Fox, making you feel like you're fighting on a huge spaceship, Corneria is more than capable in filling that void. It looks and feels great to play on, an absolute classic design being one huge structure you're fighting on with enough room to move around. The R-Wing and ship lasers are fun, deadly hazards that really impact the front of the ship, while the back is safer, but quickly becomes an absolute beatdown zone, being bounced off the wall and struggling to recover. This stage is really one of a kind, and I'm so happy it was given its room to shine by removing Orbital Gate Assault. We're not quite done with Mario stages yet. There are some stages that I knew would rank poorly from the very beginning, Mario Bros included among them. This feels like the laziest implementation of a classic game as a stage, truly just plopping the design in with the same graphical style and hoping it's fun to play on. Well, it's not. At all. The fixed camera makes players feel minuscule, the looping mechanic is lame, and the mobs turned projectiles are far too potent. There's also basically no incentive to move around the stage, as you can just spend the whole fight on the bottom waiting for the fight to come to you. The first two in the bottom 5 are bad, but these final 3 are really the stages I can say I hate. This stage probably comes as a surprise to you. I know it came as a surprise to me. I've never had many strong feelings about Magicant, but coming back to play it again, I kinda love it. First and foremost, this is a breathtaking stage. It might be the most visually striking. It's so bright and dreamy, and the background is a great blend of 3D elements and silly 2D clips of gameplay. As a stage, I really like the layout, with higher sides keeping the fight coming together and a little lower platform to take a breather and recover. The additional elements are fun too, with this guy walking past and quirky stuff like a tomato or the walking plant guy. It feels very lively. I think the main thing keeping most people away is Flying Man. And yeah, he can get up in your grill pretty aggressively and disrupt the fight, but I don't find him that distracting. Of all the onstage enemies added in 3DS and Wii U, he's probably the best, powerful but easy enough to kill. Still, I understand why he'd detract, as he can be— oh my god, when he dies he gets more and more tombstones. A+ gold star. Is anyone really surprised by this? I mean, 75M was the stage I thought for sure would be the worst, and it's a really close call because god, this thing sucks. All I wanted to do while playing on the stage was to stop playing. It's another example of let's just put the thing right in Smash without any changes that 100% does not and has never worked. The fixed camera is still awful like in Mario Bros, the ladders make fights range from frustrating to nearly impossible, and their hazards are totally unfun. In one fight I spawned in and got comboed by DK, a spring, and the fire literally 0 to death. There's just no room to fight. I mean, do I have to keep going? This stage is trash and we all know it. I could very well see this being the worst, but there was one other that just barely took the spot. Before we get to that though, what can I say? A lot of these older designs struck a great balance between highly playable and visually distinct. I'd never really liked that you can go through the lowest platform, but I understand why, and besides that, this is one of my favorite medium-sized average fighting stages. While not as brightened up as Mushroom Kingdom, they did a great job conveying the original feel of the stage. It's layered in a fun cardboardy kind of way that fits perfectly, and the lighting is phenomenal, just like Jungle Japes. The platform design is excellent too, with these large, slightly slanted plats up high, and the smaller rotating plats that feel so singular to this stage. The barrel as a dangerous last resort is also super fun, and overall this is another stage that perfectly hits the mark of making a Smash stage while feeling like it owns the series' feel. And now, the dishonor of my worst stage in Smash Ultimate goes to... what were they thinking? This monstrosity is a freaking abomination. It's booty ass MS Paint ugly. It feels ripped right from the original game in the worst way possible. It's another trash scrolling stage. Nearly every section is terrible, and sometimes it just completely doesn't work, getting you caught on terrain, blocking your view, or randomly throwing you in the air. A 4-player game was the only time I found it vaguely acceptable, but that was only because I was distracted trying to play the game for a brief moment. It is entirely unfun to play. Say what you will about 75M, I just did, but at least that's a cute idea. Like, I get why they would try it, it's just worse that they keep bringing it back. What hurts with Pac-Land even more is that we've gotten a way better Pac-Man stage. It is gut-wrenching that we didn't get Pac-Maze from 3DS back. It was so much fun and the perfect way to represent the franchise. Surely changing its mechanics in some way or removing some features would have been better than keeping this. Absolutely worthless, and I hope I never have to play here again. But let's end on a positive note. My number one, my best stage in Smash Ultimate is... Temple has everything you could possibly want. There's tons of detail to separate individual areas, and yet it's fairly simple, not cluttering the visuals. It works with any size of fight, feeling cozy with more fighters, or like a dramatic anime showdown flying across the stage in a one-on-one. And the layout is immaculate. Again, each section feels unique and plays totally differently, and the stage as a whole feels very circular. Let me elaborate. With other large stages, things tend to feel segmented. It either feels like multiple smaller stages or is hard to traverse. With Temple, you're always gonna find a fight. It's easy enough to get across the top, the paths down to the lower sections are clear and quick in the middle, or you can take the long way around by jumping down or even jumping up if you have the ability. I've seen this meme about Temple so many times, and I think it's because Temple leaves such a strong impression on the player. It may not always be my go-to, sometimes a smaller stage is more appropriate, but this is everything Smash should be. Intense, chaotic, and plain fun. And that is my ranking for every stage in Smash Ultimate. Without a doubt, everyone's would look a little different. I'm sure your favorite may be somewhere deep in that list, so let me know what your most loved and hated stages are, and how much you hate me for my rankings. I did try to be as fair as possible with my own subjectivity. When it comes to things like how well a stage represents the series, I tried to take that with a grain of salt without the proper knowledge of everything represented. And I didn't count how a series' music selection impacts the stage because that would be ludicrous. I mean, come on, you'd have to be a total moron to try and objectively rank the hundreds of songs in Smash